What happens when a Las Vegas Reformed Jewish rabbi and a Las Vegas Presbyterian pastor have a conversation as friends? They discover that no matter where you live or what you believe, faith matters. In this episode of Faith Matters, Rabbi Sanford Akselrad from Congregation near Tamid and Reverend Adrian from Green Valley Presbyterian Church talk about Rabbi's trip to Israel, the importance of bearing witness after the Hamas-led terror attacks on October 7, 2023, the Christian community's support, and how you can help support Israel.
Adrian, good to see you.
Hey, it's good to see you, Achi.
Well, the new year has kind of made its way, and there's a lot to talk about. But on my mind is a trip that's coming up on the 27th of January.
Yeah, you are starting the new year very, very busy because you leave for Israel on January 27th.
So I'll be back, at the beginning of February. It's about a week-long trip. But normally I say I'm looking forward to going to Israel. And this one is a very different type of trip. As we talked about, I was in Israel in February, and that was for one type of experience. But this one, since October 7th, and the Hamas-Israel war began, the country has gone through such changes, an emotional roller coaster, and there's been so much loss of life on both sides. And I'm just doing my part, Adrian, to see what I can do to show solidarity with the people of Israel, to bear witness, because I'm going to meet with families whose children have been taken, or family members have been taken hostage, and we're bringing some shekels, some money over. I have one student, Omri, who is in the IDF, and if he can get leave, I'm bringing his unit money so they can buy supplies or whatever they might need. Just like our own soldiers, when we're at war, we buy things,
right,
send it to the soldiers. So that's kind of also part of my mission. So,
well, I am so proud of you for doing this. So grateful that there are people like you who are willing to go. And obviously, our listeners want to know more. So you leave on the 27th. I would imagine you're not going by yourself. You must be going with a group.
So I'm traveling there on my own. I'm flying by El Al. Not all airlines fly into Israel right now because of the war. But once I get there, I'm connecting with a group of fellow rabbis. Honestly, most of them I don't know. There's going to be a group of about 40 of us. I probably know 5. They come from all over the United States and some from Europe. And we're all, I think, pretty much wanting to do the same thing. Bear witness, show support, bring resources, and then go back to our communities and share what we felt and what we saw and what we heard. And if we can do that, I think it will really personalize the images that we now see really only on social media or television.
Well, anything that I can do to help you share that word and to get the message out when you're home, I want to be a part of that, because I think we need to increase your audience so that people know from your experience there. So you're going to fly into Tel Aviv, and then from Tel Aviv, where will you go? I don't imagine you'll stay in Tel Aviv long.
For one day, let me look at the itinerary. The first night is going to be in Tel Aviv, and then before you know it, we go to Haifa, which is north of Tel Aviv. And when we go to Haifa, they have staying at one of the kibbutzim there, some of the survivors of the kibbutz from the south. So looking at the itinerary, we are going to be visiting kibbutz Mishmar HaEmek, which is now the temporary home of kibbutz Nachal Oz. And kibbutz Nachal Oz was one of those kibbutzim, which is like a farm collective that existed in the south part of Israel near the border with Gaza, and they were terribly impacted. A lot of their kibbutz was decimated and their loved ones are currently being held hostage. So we're going to meet with them, not in the south, but actually in Haifa.
And you will stay in that kibbutz?
We will stay in a hotel.
Okay, in Haifa.
Yeah, we will stay in a hotel. So we are, yes, privileged, but we will meet with them at the kibbutz. And we'll be there a couple nights because, in addition, the Reform movement, our branch of Judaism here in America, has branches in Israel, and we're going to learn about how the rabbis there and the congregations there are supporting the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces effort in the war. And then later on, we'll make our way into Jerusalem, and we will hear from a member of the parliament, the Knesset, which is housed in Jerusalem. And his Gilad Kariv, he's actually a Reform rabbi, and he will share with us the perspective of politically how this war has impacted Israel. I don't know, maybe our listeners will remember at this time when we were talking about Israel a year ago, they were terribly divided on the issue of judicial reform, and there was huge demonstrations that were organized, and all that has, I don't want to say it's disappeared, but it's been put aside as they have a war parliament, and they've come together and they say when time is right, we'll tackle those issues. But they were very divisive issues, probably weakened the country, and now Israel needs to be one and in solidarity with itself. And so I want to hear I want to see and hear and feel what that's like in Israel right now.
Will you go up to Galilee at all? Or
we won't go that far north because they have relocated the people in the Galilee. It's a ghost town because the border of Israel and Lebanon is active right now. Hezbollah, which is in the southern part of Lebanon, is all along that border, and they constantly are now firing at Israel. Israel fires back, but in order to protect that population, they've moved them further south. So the people from the south have been moved to the middle, and the people from the north have been moved to the middle. And again, everyone's still, quote, in danger because rockets can travel. Israel as a country is only, 270 miles long and maybe 50 miles wide. It's not that big a country. So these rockets are being thwarted when possible by Iron Dome and David's sling. But it's very expensive to do that. So it was for purposes not only of economy, but psychology. They've moved the people out of harm's way the best they could.
If I could ask you, and I'm sure like myself, when you anticipate one of these trips and you plan for one of them, you must be thinking about, what am I going to say? Have you given that any thought?
What am I going to say when I come back, or what am I going to say when I'm there?
What are you going to say to these families who are in the midst of the deepest pain? These families who are wondering if their loved one will ever come home? The families who know that their loved one will never come home?
I think, first of all, I'm saying something by being there.
That's so true.
Listening.
Yeah.
Right? So the fact that we have made a point out of a short itinerary to meet with them, to hear their story, their pain, to a certain extent, it's perhaps therapeutic for them, but it also reminds them that we're keeping this whole issue of the hostages alive, because their fear, of course, is that it will be shunted aside for the bigger war, and they'll say, we care about your kids and your loved ones, but we have other things on our agenda, and they are trying desperately to keep the cause of the hostages front and center.
And when you talk about that gift of presence, I talk about it as the ministry of presence. You can't quantify that at all. It's an amazing gift to someone in the midst of grief, in the midst of pain. I would imagine for them to look at you and other rabbis from this country or other parts of the world and to say, you traveled this far because you care about us.
Right.
You care about your fellow Jew.
I've heard from a couple who made their way to America and then they travel to different Jewish communities and share their stories. And I can tell you it is heart-wrenching.
Yes.
I'm actually not looking forward to hearing it, but I feel compelled to do it so that I can come back and say, this is what I have heard. Believe it or not, Adrian, there are people who are denying that it happened or that it was so bad. This is one of those things that was graphically filmed by Hamas and documented. And yet there are people saying, well, not necessarily so bad. And there are people who are making excuses for the terrible deeds that were done against Israelis. And there's a number of reasons. Some might be anti-Semitism, some might be, misinformation campaign. But I think as the war comes on and people feel this sympathy for Palestinians and what's going on in Gaza, they feel the need to say, well, what you had, it was bad, but look what they're doing. And they're trying to draw some kind of equivalency. And psychologically in Israel and in terms of how they view the war, it just does not match up because they did not start this war. And it is really the worst loss of Jewish life in one day since the Holocaust. And part of the psyche of Israelis is the Holocaust and Israel's primary mission, which is to protect its citizens. And really, world Jewry feels Israel's there to protect us, even though we live in other countries. We have, quote, a safe haven in Israel. So psychologically, it really has destroyed the country, and they have a lot of rebuilding and a lot of trauma to go through. And so it's important, as you said, for me to go there and maybe not say that much at all other than, I hear you, my brothers, my sisters. Hineni, here I am. And I hope that will speak volumes. I hope that will.
And what you say is one of the things for which I am in such anguish. As the media reports, the media speaks less and less about the issue of the hostages. And we don't hear about that as much. We don't hear about the precipitating incident which started this tension, which now is a war.
Yeah.
And
well, it wasn't just the hostages. That was part of it. It was literally them going in and murdering and raping,
right,
and beheading and burning people. Yeah.
That event on October 7th. And so and so for you to be there with these families and to say, you are not forgotten, what a powerful message that is, right? And I would imagine you're going to be speaking with people who may not have known someone. I mean, Israel's a small country. I would imagine you're probably everyone knows someone, right?
Everyone, they'll know someone who's in the military. They'll know someone they went to high school with who was injured. There's a lot of casualties and a lot of people being hurt. They know people who were kidnapped. It's very, very personal. So I think I read, if you go demographically and compare the U.S. 9/11 experience to what happened in Israel, it would be like 40 or 50 9/11s. And so look what 9/11, we fought 2 wars, Afghanistan,
right,
20 years. Hopefully Gaza is not going to drag on that long. I honestly did not think it was going to drag on as long as it has, and it could continue, which again is very difficult because Israel's main army has to be supplemented by reservists, and that means they're not able to be active in the economy. So that will be
and reservists from this country, correct?
Yeah, from Israel, right?
Who've been called upon here in America.
Of them. Yeah, and then boom, all the people you're in the reserves until 50. So these are active people who maybe were driving taxis or in a hotel or business.
Right.
Everybody's got to serve. And that's very disruptive to, the economy and the way of life. Plus, everyone is just worried sick,
I know you've probably been asked this question too many times, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are you nervous about going?
So what's interesting is every time I go, people say that. Every time when there's peace, they say it, because sadly, every time people think of the Middle East, they think of conflict,
right,
suicide bombers and terrorism. And yet, things calm down, and then, they're thrilled to welcome people, and everyone always says how safe they are and how welcoming and how beautiful it is. This particular time, I admit I am more nervous. And people say, well, why? I said, well, it is a war zone now.
right.
I mean, it literally is a war zone. And, the funny thing is my colleagues go, you'll be safe, So it's like what I would say to people, you'll be safe. But for the first time, I don't feel quite as safe, just because I know that we're going to be in areas that are still being bombed and attacked. It's still going on. You may not see it in the papers, but Gaza, they're still firing rockets. My cousin lives outside Tel Aviv, and in the paper, not too long ago, there was a terrorist attack. 18 people were wounded. That would be like us saying, in Old Henderson, there was a madman who, killed 18 people. And, that's how close it is. That's how close it is.
If you were to ask your audience for prayer, what would you want? Where would you want us to pray?
Well, I think we need to pray for peace. Peace for Israel, the Palestinians, whatever that might look like. We can't define that, perhaps even in our prayers. I'm not even saying pray for a ceasefire, because as much as I'd like to see the fighting cease, I'm not sure that ceasing at this moment in time will truly lead to peace, or just, something that delays another war. But my ultimate prayer, of course, is that Arabs and Jews live side by side in their own entities and at peace. And it can be that way, and it has been that way. And in fact, in Israel, over 1 million people are Palestinians that live in Israel, that live in Israel proper.
Right.
25% of Israel is not Jewish, and just Arab, but it's many different ethnicities and religions. So a more pointed prayer might be, please God, watch over, the people of Israel. Watch over the IDF. That's always in my personal prayers. But for everybody, our gentle listeners, let's just pray for peace, that there comes to be, these hostages are home, the war stops, that there's an end to Hamas, that objective is achieved, so that they can begin the rebuilding of trust, of Gaza, of hope for the future for both these people. That would be my ultimate prayer. And that's a big one, God. Please listen. That's
right. Yeah. We're praying for stability. We're praying for peace. We're praying for reconciliation.
Yeah.
And, when the war ends, as you know, the work of reconciliation and building a path forward is going to take years.
Don't know. Is it like
we lay the groundwork now?
Two big fighters just beating each other up until they're just both on the ground, and when the counts to 10, they're both on the ground. Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And then they have a mutual respect, or a continued animosity, and a new generation of terrorists that will arise, having seen, their homes destroyed. We don't know. But the day after, as we call it, is on my mind. It's been on my mind since day one. what will that region look like? What will
Right.
Israel do? What will they have to do? What will become of the peace movement in Israel? What will become of the desire to gain new leaders and leadership within the Palestinian community that don't have as their main focal point the destruction of Israel, but rather the rebuilding of Gaza and jobs and security and safety for their people, and let them live their lives and not try to take from others, but just live their lives and raise their kids. I think that's what everyone wants on a personal level.
So do you see yourself in some way on a as an emissary for peace?
I would say I'm an emissary for peace adjacent.
Right.
Because I don't have that kind of power. So since there's a war going on, I'm really supporting, Israel, which is the powers that is executing this war and self-defense and in retaliation, all those things. And I want to let them know that I'm with you in heart, and now I'm physically present to bear witness.
And I think what's so important for our listening audience, those of us that are not Jewish, if we can talk real briefly, but you talked about how Israel's depending on you for help, I believe is what you said. They're depending on the Jewish community, the diaspora throughout the world to help them.
By the way, Christians too. There's big Christian support.
Huge.
Yeah.
Christian community is one of the biggest supporters of Israel.
Probably more Christians pro-Israel than Jews because there's simply more Christians.
Yeah.
40 million Christians in America.
And
there's maybe 5.5 million Jews. So yeah, it's huge for Israel.
And when you look at Israel as an American Jew, as an American citizen, there's also got to be a sense in which you look at that as your homeland. You've been there many times, but you haven't lived there.
So the term homeland is really, it can be a loaded term, it can be a metaphorical term, it can be a spiritual term. So what do we mean by that? In the Bible, in Genesis, when Abraham is chosen as the first Jew, and God says, go leave your father's household into a land that I will show you, that is the beginning of this new religion that is tied to a place on this earth. I don't know of any other religion really that has a tie to a specific place, other than maybe indigenous Americans, someone pointed out, because there is a spiritual tie of the land and how Indians practice their traditions. But for Jews, there is that political, ethnic, religious tie to Israel, going back 3,500 years. But over time, when we look at modern Zionism, there are those Jews who say every Jew should live in Israel. I don't preach that. I do think that every Jew should support Israel, however they want to define that. And for me, it's a spiritual connection more than, hey, I want to pick up my bags and move to Israel. That's not my path.
And yet there is this sense that I'm asking you must feel an obligation to take care of the people of Israel.
Right. We
say, a Jew, as a person of faith living in this country.
Since time immemorial.
Yes.
Time even of Jesus, Jews have always sent money to Israel to support the Jews in that community.
Right.
Never stopped. And now it's just more organized, if you will, that there are all these organizations, charity organizations. There's one called Friends of the IDF, Israel Defense Force, that people could donate to. Or there's Jewish Nevada, which is hooked into another nationwide charity that, again, supports Israel. And it's for, quote, peaceful purposes, because the money's not going to fight the war, but to support Israel, as there are those who have left the economy to fight the war. So I have congregants literally who are going there for a month to pick fruit, because it's that time of year and the fruit's going to go away unless someone is there to pick it. So, yeah, we feel every Jew, Yehudi Aravin Zebazeh, every Jew is responsible one for the other. And that is part of what's going on, is that we do feel that obligation to support and to stand with Israel. And I very much believe that. I
Well, I
have
want you to know is
my neck, this little, I don't know if you can see it, but this was given to me by an Israeli, and it basically says, "Bring them home." So it's something I wear now in solidarity. Bring the hostages home. It's a dog tag, and it's a small act of remembrance that I carry with me now.
that's beautiful.
I'm going to teach you an expression to say to me. Say Nasiya
Nasiya?
Tova,
Nasiya Tova.
like safe travels.
Ah,
Nasiya Tova, safe travels. Go with God. Lef Adonai. Go with God. Go to God.
so Nasiya Tova means go with God also?
No, it just means,
Yeah.
safe.
Good. Okay.
Now, you
He
can
is
have a
one
little
of our
project
prayers.
between now and then if your congregation so chooses to write letters and they give them to me. I'll pack them away and I'll present them. I've been collecting letters. I'm not going to the kotel to put little, but I will be seeing soldiers and I'll hand them letters of support. So if you want to do
Like
that,
this size piece of paper, or small pieces of paper, right?
you just put it in an envelope and I'll hand them the envelopes.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you so much for this support, Adrian, of your community and you personally. And to our listeners, thank you again for listening to this discussion. We pray for peace for all people, for all of us. And to me, that prayer itself is a matter of faith, which makes a statement once again. And when it comes to matters of faith, faith does matter, keeps us strong.
Amen.
And thank you.
And shalom.
Faith Matters features Rabbi Sanford Akselrad from Congregation Yer Tamid and Reverend Adrian Dahl from Green Valley Presbyterian Church and is produced by Leslie Snadowsky. We hope you join us again for our next podcast episode of Faith Matters.